Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Peter Jennings. I go by CSURAM88 across the daily fantasy industry. And back again doing another model preview, this time for the British Open or for the Open, whatever you want to call it. Very exciting. The majors are definitely the best in terms of DFS for golf. Bigger tournaments. Obviously, we have the Millionaire Maker, and it's just exciting. Get great coverage for these tournaments. So I'm amped as usual, and hope this will help you guys. I've made a variety of models, and that's the first thing I want to say is that I think it's important to make a lot of different models to see who's popping based on the different models that you make. So this model I actually like a lot just because of who it's spitting out in terms of plays, and I do think it makes sense, the rationale behind the model as well. And it back tests okay. Plus minus of 3.26 points is good, not great, but I do think it sets up pretty well for what we should expect here with the Open Championship. So let's dive into the weights first. I have long-term adjusted round at 31 points, a little bit higher than normal. I did want to weight that just a bit more just to see who would pop well. It's a key part of my model every week, but I have it weighted a little bit higher than normal, normally around 25 points. The next thing I have weighted is long-term driving accuracy at 5 points, so I still am playing the driving accuracy. I don't have any driving distance in this, but I do still think it's important because especially on the back nine where there's longer par fours, it's something you want to take into account. Total driving is a key stat that I'm actually looking at for the week. So you definitely want guys who are going to do well off the tee with the link style course and with the length too on the back nine. The front nine is really short, but the back nine has some of those long par fours where it certainly helps to have the distance. So I didn't weight it here. It's tougher to weight both of those in the models I found, but it definitely does matter on the back. So I have driving accuracy for 5. I have long-term scrambling at 5 points. I did take that angle with this model as scrambling. I didn't weight it huge, but I think it's important. I also have long-term birdie score at 5 points. Scrolling down, I have recent adjusted round at 6. And normally I don't do anything with this, but I am still trying to capture this recent form, even more so than usual with this particular model. I also have recent green regulation weighted at 30 points. I have recent driving accuracy at 8. I have recent scrambling score at 5, and then I have recent birdie score at 5. And then I actually don't have course history weighted at all, just because we don't have much data on it, and it's so old. So hope this model helps. I definitely think there's merit to weighting driving distance a lot more in this. I think there's a variety of things that you can do with models, which is great. Certainly something that I've played around with. I've probably made 20 or so models already for this Open, and just seeing who continuously pops is a big thing. All right, so let's look at the results here. So we have Stenson as the number one guy with the highest rating by far in this model, and that's because he's hit a ton of greens historically. He's a very accurate driver. He's great with that 3-wood, which is going to set up well for links golf, and he hits a ton of greens. So with this model and weighting accuracy and green regulation, he's going to pop, and if you look through the rest of his stats, everything is very, very solid. His recent form, his green regulation is absolutely off the charts, and his accuracy's been off the charts as well. So I like Stenson quite a bit. I'm going to definitely have a good amount of exposure to him. I think he's the guy that I'm most willing to take in that range. I do like Sergio quite a bit, but he's just a bit more expensive, 500 more, and he is popping as well in this model, so I'll talk about him in a second as well. But I do like Stenson quite a bit, and I will have a lot of exposure to him in probably both formats. Dustin Johnson, next guy. Don't need to talk too much about him. I've talked about it on the pod. I periscoped last night. Love Dustin Johnson. Definitely going to have exposure to him in cash games. The Millionaire Maker, I'm probably not going to have nearly as much of him just because I think he's going to be so popular. I'm going to go with more Day and Rory and maybe even some Spieth in the Millionaire Maker teams, but that's just an ownership play more than anything. He's the best. He's been playing the best golf in the world. Definitely a guy who has a lot of distance, obviously, and while his long-term form, his accuracy isn't as great, you take a look here, his recent form, his accuracy is fine, and his driving distance is off the charts, and his green regulation numbers are fantastic with an elite adjusted round. So, he's backing up everything. He's been the best golfer in 2016. Oops. Sorry about that, guys. Hopefully it pops back up here, the same model. All right, so we're back. Matt Kuchar, the next guy, he's a lock for me in cash games. Another really accurate player. I've talked extensively about him. In terms of points per dollar, he's the number one value for me. Going to have a ton of exposure with him in cash games. We'll see what I do. I might just go big time on Kuchar and just go all in and play him a lot in the Millionaire Maker too. But we'll see. I haven't really decided how I'm going to handle him. I might fade him in a couple spots. Where I probably will fade him for sure is with one of my entries in the Thunderdome. I don't want to go too much into the Thunderdome strategy at this point, but I think that there's merit to fading him there, especially if I'm going to have so much equity on him in another contest. And obviously, I'll have him on some. Sergio, who is just an incredible play. 10,000 does seem too expensive for Sergio just in general. If you would have said in April that Sergio is 10,000 in a major and Bubba Watson was 8,000, I think a lot of people would have laughed at you. But his form has just been absolutely incredible when we take a look here at his game log. I mean, look at this. I mean, third, 54th of the players. He was, had a bad weekend. But first at the Byron Nelson, fifth at the U.S. Open, fifth at the BMW. He's playing as good a golf as anybody, and I really like him in this style. I don't think putting's quite as important as normal, which gives him a huge bump. He's an excellent ball striker and an elite play even at that price. Steve Stricker, probably he's popping my miles. People are asking me about him. Maybe I need to look at Steve Stricker more, but as of now, I don't have too much of him. Love Andy Sullivan this week. I think he's a really sharp play. Cabrera Bello, I like him a lot. Ross Fisher, I like a lot. Furyk's an interesting guy at this point. I probably have some tournament exposure to him for sure. I think he's back from that wrist injury. I think he's playing well enough now. Love Molinari. This is a guy I play a lot. The one thing I don't love about him in general is doesn't make as many birdies as some of these other guys in this tier, but he's definitely a consistent grinder, and if you're looking for accuracy, he fits the mold. Jason Day, I think he's an absolute steal. All these guys right here I love. Day, Scott, Steele, McIlroy. I think these are some of the best players, and you'll see they all have a bunch of pro trends as well. So these are good things to identify. The pro trends is definitely a nice thing to look at with these golfers, and certainly something I'm evaluating a lot. So these guys actually have popped a lot. If you start weighting driving distance more, these guys will pop a lot more in your miles. You can see they're all elite in driving distance, and they just don't have the accuracy in the long-term form and in the short-term form, especially for Scott and Day, which, the putter's been bailing Day out. And I guess with Scott, it's just he just hasn't been as accurate off the tee recently. He was playing great off the tee in that early part of the season when he was in that Florida stretch, but still some great plays there. Adam Scott in particular in tournaments I think will be somewhat low-owned. So I like all those guys. I like Keimer is another play. Keegan Bradley. This guy is not going to be on any of my teams. I'm going to be on the stone cold fade of Keegan Bradley. Just cannot putt well enough. And even where putting I don't think matters as much, I'm off him. Grillo, I like a lot. Again, you're looking at someone who's very accurate here off the tee. Hits a good amount of greens. I guess his short-term accuracy hasn't been as good. If we go to his long-term accuracy, which I think is a better indicator for Grillo, definitely an accuracy type player. Mickelson, I've heard some polarizing opinions on. I think he's fine. I think his ownership will still be there just because people like to take Phil. But at that price, 8,600, definitely an interesting target. Probably not going to play much Willett. I read and heard a variety of things about the pressure clearly is getting to him, and I think he starts off in a pairing with Rory and Day or something. He has some ridiculous pairing where he's going to have a huge crowd, definitely a marquee group. So I'm not going to have much Willett. Grace, a lot of people are on. I like him, but I think I'm going to have more Stenson and more Sergio and fade a lot of Grace. Hopefully that doesn't burn me, but you have to take a stance somewhere. Scrolling a little bit farther down, I don't mind Duffner for accuracy, and just he's been really great this season. If you look at his game log, he's been incredible, just making cut after cut after cut. I missed it at the Masters, but outside of that, he's been great since. But he's more of a kind of a grinding type player. And the problem with Duffner relative to other weeks is his price is kind of in that same range as a lot of other elite players. So just scrolling a little bit farther down, not going to have too much Louis. Fitzpatrick originally I was kind of on, but because he's an accuracy guy, but Colin kind of talked me off that. Noren's interesting. Obviously, if you followed the Scottish, he won that. I know a lot of people like to take that tournament and translate it to this one. Certainly have no problem with that, and he's in great form. I'll definitely have exposure to him in tournaments. And then just going a little bit farther down, I mean, we're starting to get into bad range. You can see Bubba doesn't rate well because of his accuracy in this model, especially recently has been very, very bad off the tee. But, 8,000 is way too cheap for him. I'm just not a believer in taking a guy who's, historically not done as well overseas and has the reputation for mailing it in, but that hasn't really been proven by the data. He's made all the cuts this year that he's played in. I hope this is helpful for you guys, just going through this. And, of course, good luck in all your contests this week at the British Open. And looking forward to seeing more Fantasy Lab subscribers at the top of the leaderboard.